International Media TV. Television that listens to you.
Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program.
Crawl. Thanks for your patience. Please join me in welcoming back Michael Schultz. One of the things that, of course, comes up whenever you talk about this movie is the soundtrack, and I was interested to find out that it sounds like all of the soundtrack was determined before the film, or the predominant part?
No. Before the film, I had asked Norman to create 3 songs. I said, I need 3 songs so that I can shoot to the music. And the first one was Car Wash. And I called it the Car Wash Ballet. And people would say, what? The what? I said, yeah, it's everybody coming to work in the morning, and they're all doing their individual thing, and I want them to do it to music. So it's kind of like a quiet ballet. As a matter of fact, the whole movie was a unspoken musical. When the producers, 2 young guys, had come to Universal and they were pitching the project because they wanted to get funding to do a Broadway musical. And when the studio executive heard the pitch, he said, forget musical, this sounds like a movie. So when they told me that story, I said, okay, well, we'll do it as a closet musical. We just won't tell people, that it's a musical. And where we finally broke out into song and movement was in the Richard Pryor Pointer Sisters sequence, where we just said, yeah, now we'll let people know it's a musical.
And I mean, with a cast like this, of course, there are several great stories to tell, I'm sure, about how people came to be associated with the movie. I'm wondering if you can tell maybe 2 or 3 of your favorite about how certain people came to be in the film.
Yes, well, the first was Ivan Dixon, who plays the ex-con who's been there, done that scene where it's led him and is trying to turn his life around. That character really needed a solid, feet on the ground presence, energy. And Ivan Dixon had given up acting. He had directed Spook Who Sat by the Door, and he did not want to act. And I just begged and pleaded with him. I said, the film needs that kind of solidity that you have as a human being. And in order to make the statement of the film, I really need you to do it. And so he finally caved, and did it. And the Daddy Rich character was based on a real, I call them bootleg preachers, anybody know, and this preacher was out of New York. Anybody know who that was? Daddy Grace. Not Daddy Grace. Yep. Reverend Ike. And Reverend Ike was the kind of preacher who would stand in front of his multitudinous congregation and say, the best way to help the poor is not be one of them. and send me your $1 and I'll send you a prayer cloth, you know. And I actually got him to come to a meeting at Universal at lunch, you know, and talk about being in the movie. And then as we talked, he gradually realized that would not be good for his career. Richard Pryor, somebody at dinner asked me, you know, how did you get Richard Pryor, you know? And I had been introduced to Richard maybe a year before I got that movie, got Car Wash. And United Artists had a film that they wanted to make that the black writer named Matt Robinson, who created Grover Cleveland of the Muppets, had come up with an idea to do a comedy about a hustler from Chicago who becomes president of the United States. And it was called Simmons from Chicago. United Artists wanted to do it, and they flew me out from New York to LA to meet with Richard Pryor, who they wanted to star in the film. And that's how I met him. And I was a theater director, and this was like my first offer to do a Hollywood movie. And in negotiating with the studio, they wouldn't come up with a budget that I thought was adequate to make a quality film. And so I turned it down. I said, if you won't give us the money to make a decent film the way you do with white movies, I'm not interested. And I think Richard liked that stand, and we kind of kept the conversation going. And I wouldn't say a friendship, but a conversation going. And when Reverend Ike turned the job down, I called Richard Pryor and said, hey, would you mind doing a parody of Reverend Ike? It'll only take a day, you know? So he did it. And once we got Richard, then we got George Carlin and, you know, the crazy Professor Irwin Corey, you know. And then we were off and running.
And I'll have one more question, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. And we have a microphone out there, so make sure you wait for the microphone to get to you. But one of the things also you were talking about at dinner that you fought for was to be able to shoot chronologically, and that you kind of had an ulterior motive because you had an ending in mind that you wanted to see come to fruition. But it also dovetails with the idea that Car Wash has a number of character vignettes woven through that are, some of them are comedic, but some of them are quite serious. And how did you and the writer Joel Schumacher find that balance and talk about that balance? Because there are economic issues and issues of sexuality and I mean, I think there's a lot going on in this movie beyond the music and the comedic bits, and I just wonder how that evolved, along with talking a little bit about the ending that you wanted to shoot and how you got there.
Well, when I first got the opportunity, when they offered me the movie, I read the script, and it was all hijinks comedy. And the characters were all in the original script, Abdullah and Lonnie and all of that. And I was more interested in doing serious film. I was talking with people about doing the George Jackson, Angela Davis story, you know. And I wanted to do some hard-hitting drama. And so before I turned it down, I talked to a woman named Suzanne DePass, who was Berry Gordy's right-hand person who discovered the Jackson 5, etc. And I said, yeah, they offered me this movie, but I'm turning it down. She said, nigga, are you crazy? She said, that's a Hollywood movie, you know? If it's not what you want, take the job and make it what you want. It's a little Booker T. Washington lesson there. And I said, well, you know, that was the best advice I ever got. So I took the job, and I told the producers, I said, look, there's got to be a serious through line in this movie to balance the comedy so that we're really telling a story that makes a difference. You know, it's not just all fun and games. And so Joel rewrote the script to really beef up that story between Lonnie and Abdullah. And Universal looked at it, and they liked the idea. They knew that the music would, or hoped the music would work. But they really said, you can't mix drama and comedy. You just can't do it. I said, why not? I came from theater background where, you know, Moliere and Shakespeare and all of that was doing it hundreds of years before. And so we had this ongoing argument through the pre-production of the film and all of that. And I finally realized they were not going to give in. They were dead set that the movie wasn't going to end the way it ends. And I was dead set that it was going to end that way. And so I talked them into, I said, look, there's multiple stories going on in the frame. So while the people in the foreground are doing their scene, there's stuff happening in the background. There's no way that we can do it out of sequence. And almost all movies are made out of sequence because it depends on, if you're in this location, you shoot everything in the location. It's more efficient economically and time-wise. And I said, it just can't be done that way. The script supervisor will never be able to match the action. The actors won't remember what they're doing. So I have to shoot it in chronological order. And they said, okay, all right, fine. But the reason I was doing it was because we were fighting about the ending in the movie. Not fighting, but having a difference of opinion. And while I was shooting the film, we were still kind of crafting the ending in a way that maybe Universal would be okay with. And finally, I was 3 days over schedule, and the head of Universal calls me up and says, Schultz, you're going to finish the damn film? And I said, yeah, if you let me end it the way I want to end it. And so they gave in and said, okay, because they thought in editing they could probably, you know, change it. But it didn't work out that way, thank goodness.
All right, let's take some questions from the audience. And like I said, we have a microphone, so wait for it to come to you. Here we go, yes.
Great. You spoke of Broadway, and I loved Mulebone. I just had to say.
Thank you.
Yeah. And speaking of Broadway, I was interested to hear the origin story of this, because every time I see it, it's a live musical to me. And I wondered if that was anything that you ever seriously considered.
Well, I considered it, but the company that owns it, Universal, has been there was an English company that wanted to do a musical version of it about 3 or 4 years ago. They wouldn't let the rights go. I think they're trying to figure out how to do it, you know, but they're not talking to me. Oh, and Mulebone, by the way, was a play that I did for Lincoln Center, Skip Gates, the Harvard professor, found in a trunk somewhere an old play that was co-written by Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston. And Lincoln Center decided to do it. And I got Taj Mahal to do the music, and we did it on Broadway because the Vivian Beaumont was busy at the time. And it was really interesting.
Cool. First of all, I wanted to know if you've seen Boots Riley's incredible film, Sorry to Bother You. And
Not yet, but okay. I'm very anxious to see it.
Because have you heard about the Last Dragon homage in it, which is amazing?
Oh, no.
Oh, they have to credit the film at the end for. It's great. But second, I wanted to know when Joel Schumacher gave you the script, had he come out yet? Did people know that he was gay?
I don't think so.
Okay, so were you consciously? You didn't feel like there was a conscious element to try to include Lindy's character in the film as a statement?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean. What was great about Joel was he really was able to capture all of those characters, and it was very bold of Universal at the time to even let that character exist in a film. They didn't let that character exist in the TV version. They cut Lindy's character out and replaced it with other sequences that I had shot that they cut out of the film, much to my chagrin. Danny DeVito and Brooke Langton, who owned the hamburger shop, there was a whole storyline about them, and so they took the Lindy character out as far as they could and replaced it with that storyline.
Don't watch the TV version, I think, is the lesson we're taking away from that.
Right.
Mr. Schultz, thank you for visiting with us tonight.
Where are you?
I'm right here. Sorry.
Oh, great.
Thanks for coming. My question was, around the time this film came out, I was pretty close to a bunch of people in the acting scene in L.A., and the word was out that it was quite a special experience on the set. And I heard, I'd love to ask you if this is true or if it's just mythology, that the actors would have political discussions about how best to make this movie happen. People were even talking about Bertolt Brecht and that kind of thing. Do you recall this being more than just an ordinary shoot?
Well, it was special for me, I'll tell you. But I didn't have time to be a part of those discussions. What was interesting is, from an actor point of view, is that none of the actors in the beginning wanted to be there all the time. Actors have a way of, if I'm not saying the words, do you really need me? So when they heard that they had to be there every day, all the time, at first it was a real kind of shock to them, because that's just not the way it normally works out. But they finally acquiesced if they wanted the part, and they were there all day long while we were shooting other things, so the actors had a lot of time to talk. But what was great about the composition of that cast is, from the oldest actor, Clarence Muse, he was the first black actor in the first movie made, in The Jazz Singer. And so the stories that he would tell about being in Hollywood at that time, and the pride that he had of seeing a black director, running the show, was just amazing. So we had all kinds of interesting, fascinating people in the film. So I'm sure that was true.
Oh, hey, I've seen this movie about 10 or 15 times, and it never occurred to me that it kind of reminds me a lot of Nashville or those kind of movies from the 70s. Were you kind of influenced by Altman, or were you a contemporary?
I totally. Car Wash is my ode to Altman's Nashville. I loved what he was trying to do in the movie, and even though it wasn't that successful, I thought what he had done in that film was really bold and fascinating. And so I said, well, I'm going to do my version of Nashville.
Cool.
Little bit of a local angle. I saw Car Wash the year it came out at UC Berkeley in Albert Johnson's African American cinema class. I kind of got the feel that some other people might know. But did you know Albert?
Yes, I did, but...
I just want to say, I mean, he recognized immediately what you were doing. I mean, really made an impression.
Great. Yeah, he was a fascinating guy. I didn't know him well, but I knew him. We had conversations.
There's another.
Was Car Wash Clarence Muse's last film?
I believe it was. Yeah. Huh? Okay. Stanley Clark's passing through. Larry Clark's passing through. Good. What year was that?
77.
Okay, so right after, yeah.
So I recently read a fun fact about the movie. I'm right here. Hi.
Okay.
Where I was reading an interview with Antonio Fargas where he said that your wife was in the movie as well.
Yes, she was.
Can you talk about that casting decision, how that came to be?
Gloria, her acting name was Lauren Jones, played the hooker. She was the hooker. And that casting decision, she had to audition 3 times, and I kept telling the producers, well, this is the best actress in town, and after that film, she said, well, I played a slave, a maid, and a prostitute. I think I'm done.
Hi, and thank you. I'm here. So while watching the film, I was struck by how timeless some of the issues that the film covers seem and feel.
Unfortunately,
characters and but some of it also felt a bit. All of it was relevant to its time, and some of it felt a bit relevant to a time that is not like today. And so I'm wondering, if you were to remake Car Wash now, what are some of the issues that you would feel necessary to cover that you weren't able to or even thinking about when you made it before?
That's an interesting question. But I would definitely deal with the whole immigration issue, the responsibility of citizenship issue, shed light on what happens when you are not involved, and the prison system issue would be a lot more intense than what exists in this one. The issues are the same. They're just far more critical now.
I want to ask a little bit of a technical question before we go on to this next one, which came out of the discussion of you shooting the film chronologically. And I just wonder about, I mean, I think there are a lot of complications that arise when you do such a thing, but I was wondering just about the color matching for the time of day and kind of how are you dealing with the logistics of making sure, okay, this is the nighttime scene and we have to make sure that it's shot.
We waited till night,
So they had a lot of time to talk about Brecht sometimes.
Oh, we did other stuff, it was really well planned out. So when we needed the night stuff and the early morning stuff, we were shooting in the locker room, or in the cafe away from the windows so you couldn't see that it was getting darker.
Got it.
But the DP was very good, and it was really interesting because we used an actual location that is not far from MacArthur Park, and in Los Angeles, if anybody knows LA, MacArthur Park is a very seedy kind of like Panic in Needle Park place, and even though there were lights, big 4K lights around, and there were cameras around. When my wife showed up in her hooker outfit, suddenly phone calls were being made by the local hookers to their pimps saying, "Who is this new, who's this new chick on the block?" So there was this very interesting interaction with the community as we were shooting the film, because they were looking at it like it was a real thing happening, not like a movie.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes. So you said previously that you had 3 songs pre-existing the film, and then you shot on the songs, the music. But do you? So how did you work with the composer making the film or editing? How did you work with the music?
That's a good question. There was no composer on the film. Norman Whitfield, who is just a Motown genius, was a record producer, and he produced some great songs, but he didn't know how to score film or whatever. So in the editing process, the editor and I took apart the music, and we would take sections and remove the lyrics, and we kind of created our own score in the editing. That answer your question? Okay.
There's a question down front if somebody has a microphone nearby.
I just wanted to say that I've seen the film many times since I was a little boy, and hearing you answer that question made me think of Bill Duke's character, and he has that one sort of pivotal scene where he plays the saxophone, and I felt that that was the necessary arc point, to understand the end of the film, and it stands apart from the rest of the sort of mixtape DJ sort of excitement of the whole film. You get this very dark and introspective moment with him playing. So I think that that's a really sort of interesting, because there's so many arcs in the story, but then when you get to the end, it's just this wonderful thing where this sort of angry character, who when the Pointer Sisters are singing at him, he has this sort of internal music that stands apart from the the mediated sounds coming out of the car wash. So I'm sure that was intentional, but it finally kind of hit me in the head. So thank you.
It was very intentional. As a matter of fact, there was another scene where he was also playing that I was forced by the studio to eliminate because they thought it was too dramatic.
All right, I want to make sure we're not missing any questions. All right, cool. Oh, we do? Yes, in the middle.
Well, it is not a question, but it is just a bravo, because I kept expecting, and in that last scene, I've only seen it maybe once or twice, okay, so, and everything was positive in that film. You know, and I thought, you know, I'm so used to the idea, uh-oh, here it comes. He's going to shoot him, right? I really thought that. And it didn't happen, you know. It's like, wow, so life-affirming. It really, thank you so much.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Really lovely.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to struggle for that? Did Universal, I mean, it sounds like Universal wanted a comedy first off, but when they agreed to have some dramatic element, were you ever asked to make it darker or to make something bad happen?
No. That was the furthest thing from their mind. They just wanted basically a popcorn comedy, you know? And, you know, we just kind of commented in that last scene with Bill and Ivan on the comedy show, you know, and some of it was improvised, most of it was written, but I just wanted to show that kind of love between two black men, a kind of fathering figure that could hopefully rescue the youth. And to me, that was the most important message in the film. So,
I have the microphone. And I just want to say I really appreciate your genius and what you did. And to prove it, I brought my grandson, who wasn't even born. His mother was 4 when the movie came out, and I've seen it, and he loves it. It was relevant for him. He was just telling me, laughing at all the appropriate. So I just want, I don't know what genius is, but if it spans 3 generations, thank you for your genius and the wonderful film.
Thank you for the compliment.
Could you, Michael, could you speak to the power of telling young, I'm here in the corner, could you speak to the power of young filmmakers telling their story in their own way, not copying others? I had the experience of working on a film with Sam Peckinpah, and as a very young man, and it's one of the lessons I learned. But could you speak to the power of images and telling your own story and not copying others to make it happen? Thank you.
Well, I can only just, you know, when you're doing this work as a young director, you know, you just want to tell stories that have some kind of impact on people, and I always wanted to build bridges between us and everybody else and let people know who we were. But I wasn't really aware of the impact and the power that this medium has until getting this constant wave of kind of appreciation and people telling me, you know, how this film or that film changed their lives or saved them during high school or what have you. And you sit back as a creative person and say, wow, I didn't know that what I was doing could really save somebody's life, you know? And in terms of being able to navigate through this kind of crazy world that we have and still come out as hopefully a good human being. So it's critically important and extremely difficult for young filmmakers to kind of keep their own voice and get through the system But I think even though it's difficult today, it's easier than ever. So I just applaud all the young people who want to tell stories and make a difference, and not just make money,
There's a question in the middle of the back.
Thanks. Yeah, hi, this is just a food question. I'm just wondering if you ate a lot of Tommy's burgers while you guys were filming that movie.
No, I think I was in my vegetarian period.
So, without further ado, I want to thank all of you for being here. Please thank Michael Schultz
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thank you for being here.